Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
3, 2, 1, and we're back. Julie, welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, our daily podcast. And listeners, thank you for continuing to make this #1 listen to daily podcast for real estate professionals in at least the United States, but damn, I'm tempted to say the world.
The world.
But we can't.
Certainly almost. We'll see.
Yeah. I doubt if there's anybody crazy enough to do a daily podcast for real estate agents anywhere else on planet Earth.
That's probably fairly certain.
It's just us.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's easy for us to make that claim then.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. I was going to say masochistic, but maybe not. All right. So we are talking about the housing crash coming soon. And is there a housing crash coming soon? And if you've listened to the previous 4 shows on this topic, you'll know our opinion, but we're giving you all the information that Julie and I used to use the same information we use to come to our conclusion. We're giving you that same information. We're challenging you to do your own homework and do your own research, because at the end of the day, that's really what's going to matter. It's one thing to listen to Julie and I say why we think the way we think, and maybe you're just in lockstep with that, but it's another thing for you to actually think about why we think what we think, and maybe you see flaws in our thinking. You guys get the point here? Learn to be somebody who doesn't just consume information, but someone who is introspective about the information they're consuming, and then it not only makes you smarter, it not only makes you a more interesting person, but it also makes you more of a professional, and so you can have more literate conversations with your prospective, everyone really, right? Your family, your friends, your prospective clients, because this is going to be and continue to be a topic du jour, especially as inflation becomes the main topic on everyone's minds. And, we noticed inflation. Julie and I actually talked about inflation. We did a podcast with an economist. I don't know if you remember this guy. I don't remember him either, his name, but he was a Canadian guy. Mm-hmm. And this was clear back probably in 2009, 2008. Mm-hmm. And he was telling about how to look for inflation, and inflation's an inevitable byproduct of all the types of things that the government does with the creation of currency and printing mm-hmm. fiat currency and blah, blah, blah. And, it was fascinating, and I never forgot some of the lessons that he said. But the interesting thing that happened was the government was still able to more or less stave off inflation in a meaningful way. But this time, it's not happening. No. This time, you're already seeing inflation actually kick in, and now you're just seeing it's making headline news on CNN. It's being talked about amongst people who would normally even know what the word inflation meant. And to validate what I'm saying, one of the most common search for terms right now is anything to do with people researching inflation to understand really what it is. And why are people doing that? Not because other people are talking about it, but because they're actually seeing it. They're seeing gas prices. They're seeing the cost of food. They're seeing the cost of eggs. Julie and I found a whole bunch of anecdotal information when we were preparing today's show. Everything. I mean, there was the cost of an egg. I forget how much has gone up per egg, but it was like 41 cents or something.
Yeah, now we reported yesterday or the day before about the prices going up with lumber and appliances and steel and drywall. So, of course, that's all housing related, but it's not just in housing. You mentioned eggs. Certainly, I know for sure I'm spending more on groceries than I ever have before. Looking anywhere, shampoo has gone up.
Well, this was kind of a joke, I think, but one of our friends who has their massive poodle, this monstrous thing, groomed, and they have it done once a week. The groomer basically doubled the price. Right. And I got to thinking, well, what exactly in that groomer's life had basically gone up to the point where they could justify doubling the price? But they did, and this person still paid it. I'm sure all their other, this groomer's clients paid it as well. So anyway, that's inflation for you. But we're going to talk more specifically about how it pertains to the real estate markets and what you guys can expect and what you'll experience. And again, our goal here is to educate you so that you can then educate your clients and you can stay ahead of the curve. When other agents you're competing with, and the word is competing because you do compete, when the other agents you're competing with don't know what inflation is, and you're able to have, again, a very fluid conversation with a prospect, don't you see how that's going to give you an advantage? It absolutely is.
That's right. So one of the main points that we wanted to make during this podcast series, and this is part 5, and I think that we'll wrap it up with today's podcast, is that there's not one factor that is affecting whether there will be a housing crash, adjustment, or boom. There are many factors. So we started talking about mortgages. We talked about new construction. We talked about migration. All of these things work hand in hand. There is no one specific factor. A lot of people want to make it all about prices going up, and prices can't go up forever. Well, what's making prices go up? These are the things we want you to study and know about so you can speak intelligently.
And when she says migration, she's not talking about immigrants coming to the United States. Of course, that's a thing. But really what she's talking about is the biggest sort of mass migration people from the cities into the countrysides. I only say it like that because during the Industrial Revolution, those of you who remember studying this in school, it was just the opposite, right? People left the farms and they went to the cities in order to have jobs, and that was a big shift. And everyone said, it'll never go back. People always stay in the cities. And then the suburbs started getting built in the 50s. And people said, a backyard's not a bad thing. And now technology is making it so people can even push further out from the city centers. And guess what? The very second that they can, they do. So that tells you about what's in the true hearts of folks when they're deciding their lifestyles. They actually only maybe chose to live in cities for the sake of employment and, financial security. And as soon as they're given the option of working remotely, because of changing expectations and because of technology, they do. And that trend's obviously a macro trend, so that's going to continue for at least a generation or two, a generation representing 10 years.
Yes, and as it turns out, people actually liked working from home by and large, based on our reports from yesterday that I forget, what was it? It was between 50 and somewhere, maybe 60% said that they intend to try to keep working remotely from home.
Well,
even if they don't have to going forward.
Julie and I are going to be doing a U.S. tour of sorts, and starting in July, right?
Yes.
And we're going to be going around for July and August. We're going to be driving around. We don't know how much of the United States. And we're going to be visiting a lot of our coaching clients, a lot of the folks in our EXP groups. We're going to be documenting through a vlog, right? And we're going to be doing our podcast on the road. We're going to be talking about the real estate markets we're going to. We're going to be posting lots of Instagram pictures. So we're going to be doing all that. We're going to explore what's really going on in the world of all your micro markets. We're going to go there. We're going to see what's going on. We're going to take pictures. We're going to then report from the road. So that's something we're really, really looking forward to. And that's starting in January.
July.
Did I say January?
You did. That's right. Okay, so people like to throw around inflation and appreciation as if it's the same thing, and it actually is not. So I wanted to start with definitions. This is important to all of you guys who are real estate professionals because there is a difference. So might want to take notes at this point. Warning, definitions. What is inflation? Inflation is a general increase in prices and fall in the purchasing value of money. I'm giving you the simple version, then I'm going to elaborate.
Listeners, make sure you listen to what Julie's saying. I had her explain this to me. I knew what the difference was, but I wanted to make sure she could explain it in such a non-wonkish way that even the person who's never heard of these words before would understand. And she has actually woven together something brilliant. So make sure you're paying attention because this is the conversation. This very topic is going to be the thing that will separate the wheat from the chaff in the upcoming months as homeowners start asking you about this very question.
And
they will.
Look at the search results, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So what is inflation? It's a general increase in prices and fall in the purchasing value of money. What is appreciation? Increase in monetary value. Now, that all sounds like kind of the same definition to me, so I took it a little bit further here. Appreciation is when, quote, intrinsic value of something, like a house, increases. This is not the same as price or cost. We're talking about actual value, as in something grows more valuable. So you might write in your notes, appreciation equals something becomes more valuable. So what are some examples of that? How does something actually gain value or appreciate? So instead of using appreciation and inflation interchangeably, start using appreciation and value interchangeably to help you remember. So how does something actually gain value or appreciate? Well, increased demand, not enough supply. Additional value is discovered on your property. Could be oil, for example, developed road frontage, adding utilities where there weren't any before. Maybe you replaced your windows and they're not falling out anymore, okay? Maybe Amazon, Google, or Tesla, or any number of other companies decides to relocate 3,000 employees right to your town and there aren't enough homes to go around. That would be supply and demand, okay? So that creates more value. Appreciation reflects a change in the actual property itself. This is another thing that's really different. Appreciation reflects the change in the actual property itself. Now, let's draw a line in your notes. inflation can look just like appreciation, but it is not actually appreciation. Should we let them digest? That's a lot of words.
Well, I mean, that's the reason that you and I, we don't conflate, but we use those words simultaneously, right? We'll say inflation and appreciation. And we say that because in the real estate industry, and you guys should notice this because it is kind of funny, they never say the word inflation. It's very rare that people in the industry, especially like on Julie and I's level, will say inflation, call it out for what it is. It's because it's so funny to me. The industry doesn't like that word. They want to call housing, they want to say housing is appreciating.
It sounds more warm and fuzzy.
It's ridiculous. I mean,
but
honestly,
it's less accurate.
It's intellectually dishonest too.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is that inflation and appreciation really are completely different. So, don't assume that they have the same in the short run. They have the same. They feel the same, right?
They have the same look and feel, which
Right.
is prices are higher.
Exactly. But in last year, well, look, it's not even last year. Really, for the last 2 years, there's been noticeable inflation, and I think the industry could have gotten away with calling it appreciation because everything else wasn't increasing in cost as quickly as housing was. You could be in Columbus, Ohio, and you could have your house go up by 20% in a year, and yet all your other costs did not increase. Your living costs and whatnot didn't also increase. So you were experiencing the benefit of having an asset. I mean, you guys get what I'm saying here. That was worth more. And it was worth more in the financial benefit of it if you were to sell it. That money was actually giving you more buying power in the marketplace because of the appreciation of that said asset. But if in an inflationary time, which we're in now, if the asset goes up 20%, the house goes up 20%, and you're saying, holy cow, I hit the lottery, woo, good me. And then you go and you sell the house. Well, everything else has gone up 20% as well, meaning that basically it didn't give you any additional buying power. So it might as well not have increased in cost at all. And
Yes.
you guys get the point?
There's a ratio to that. And, I did a lot of research on this, and you can get really, really analytical on this stuff. But one thing that I noticed that which I didn't go down that rabbit hole.
But you secretly love.
Well, I do think it's interesting.
It is.
But one of the things I found fascinating was that economists will say to you that you can have inflation and appreciation at the same time intertwined.
Yep.
That are working together, and it's very difficult, even using all of their crazy, analytical equations with all their squiggles and stuff and their charts and graphs. It's very hard for them to say that this home is worth that because 20% of that's because of appreciation and 80% of that's because of inflation.
Well, let's not get in the weeds.
That's what I'm saying, is that they work together. They're
Right.
not the same, but they work together.
Right. So
and that's as analytical as I wanted to get.
We'll give just a real quick example to drive the point home. Mm-hmm. So back in Austin, where Jules and I used to live, we still have properties there. There's an area, I don't remember the town, that's down by the Circuit of the Americas, which is a incredible race car track. And around it is absolutely nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so Tesla is going to build their truck factory down there in that particular part of Texas. Now Elon is saying essentially, if you've got a high school diploma and you're ambitious and you're willing to work, we're going to give you a job, and the jobs are going to be very well paying and So what you're having is you're going to have wage inflation wage inflation because all these people are going to be looking for jobs. But in this otherwise isolated area of Texas, you're actually having actual honest to God appreciation. At the same time, you're having inflation because what's going on in the overall economy. So people who own those sort of bog-like properties down that area, because it really very weird land down there. Anyway, so people who had properties down there, they are really hitting the real estate lottery because they're seeing inflation from the truck factory, and they're seeing the benefits of appreciation from the truck factory and inflation going at the same time. Now, once their costs of everything else in their lives catch up, they'll still be ahead of the curve because of the fact that they had appreciation going for them for the sake of the added, essentially demand for real estate in that particular part of Texas.
That's a really good example, and especially there because their basis of what they've got in it is low, so their margins
like
higher.
nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's see. So inflation can look like appreciation, but is not actually appreciation. Inflation is when the actual number of dollars it takes in order to purchase your property has increased. The main difference is that inflation does not actually reflect a change in the asset itself. That's a big point, okay, to keep them separate. So inflation is actually the expansion of the money supply. That is the actual number of dollars it takes to buy something such as a house. And that inflation does not actually reflect a change in the asset itself. In other words, that farmland and those lots around the track, they might never have had any improvements to them at all, except for the fact that Tesla is moving in and going to employ people.
So you bought your house in January of last year. And congratulations, you paid $350,000 for it. According to all the people that track this, your house is now worth $35,000 more, and you did absolutely nothing to improve the value of the property. That's what Julie's saying.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so how does this affect our real estate market today? Okay, I have this from Bigger Pockets. They wrote, on April 11th, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell appeared on 60 Minutes and stated, quote, it's highly unlikely that the Federal Reserve will raise interest rates this year. This is music to the ears of investors of all types, as low interest rates tend to provide fuel to a growing economy. But there are more considerations afoot, like rising inflation that we've been talking about. Now, the Fed's target interest rate, which is what Powell is referring to here, is an important indicator for mortgage prices, especially adjustable rate mortgages or ARMs and HELOCs, that's home equity lines of credit, which are often tied to this rate. Now, on Tuesday, the Bureau of Labor Statistics announced that the Consumer Price Index, a common measure of inflation, rose at its fastest rate in 9 years. That's not wild inflation, but it is the highest rise in inflation since 2012.
Skip this part because the fact is that I don't think anyone can truthfully trust that particular statistic.
Here's a little fun fact
because
about that.
they totally manipulate it.
Yes, and further reading also, I discovered that they don't always use housing indexes in that. And there's a big discussion going on to throw that in.
So just to get really ahead of our skis and to sound like total nerds, is that the fact is that the government cannot fight inflation by anything other than rising interest rates. And the government can't raise interest rates because essentially, and I saw this very fascinating chart, and I think it went back, oh man, I don't remember. It was a long time, maybe 10 years, maybe not that long. And it was, I sent this to you. It was the rising value of the Dow.
Yeah.
It was commensurate with the amount of money that basically was being released in the economy.
That's
so the more money that was being printed, the more money was going to stocks. So people were essentially more liquid, and then they're investing in more stocks. And then there was this little downward blip when basically there was a news announcement that the Fed was going to stop. This? They don't call it quantitative easing, but whatever they want to call it nowadays. In other words, they weren't going to continue to inflate the economy by printing more money. Stimulus, call it that. And then like the same day, the stock values just plunged. And if you look at, for example, that so much of the economy right now is dependent on this continued inflation of the money supply, of sending people more money. That's the obvious boots on the ground experience, but also all the expansion of the economy and the amount of debt. I also read that there's something like, realistically, there's with the unfunded liabilities and whatnot, there's something like $24 trillion worth of debt. And so what happens is, and this is an interesting way of thinking about how this actually works. So if you've got a household budget that it costs your family, let's say every year, $50,000 to pay all your bills, but you only earn $25,000, right? So it costs you $50,000 to stay in your house, to buy food, to keep Susie in braces, the whole thing. But you've only earned $25,000. So in order to meet your liabilities and cover your costs, you need to then borrow the extra $25,000. That's what the government does. But the government, in essence, prints its own $25,000. And then what happens by printing more money, they're essentially saturating the money that you have. So by creating more of something that's supposed to be hard to get, that very thing becomes less valuable, right? So if you think an ounce of gold, for example, is super valuable, it's worth what, $1,700, $1,800 an ounce. But all of a sudden, it turns out that all of South Dakota, North Dakota, it turns out if everyone just dug 6 inches down, it's a solid bar of gold. So that means all this new gold's going to come to the market, which means it's going to decrease the value of that $1,800 ounce gold that you have. That's called oversaturation in essence. I'm oversimplifying it, but you guys get the point. And the same thing is happening now with dollars. That's going to cause, because there's so much more money in the economy, there's only so many things that people can buy. Peter Schiff was talking about this yesterday. It was kind of funny. Car prices are going through the roof right now. Not just used car price. Well, used car prices are up. Cars are now have increased in cost in the last 6 months by something like 10 or 15%.
Yes, used cars. I read that specifically.
It was insane.
Almost 11%.
Yeah, your car, listeners, is worth more than it was, last year this time for sure. It's gone up in value.
Now that's definitely inflation, right? Because did you do many improvements to your car? Did the asset itself change? And in fact, it might have gotten worse.
It did. You put miles on it. You wore it down. You used it. The asset itself, it became less valuable in terms of intrinsic value, but it became more valuable from the sense of what the market was willing to pay for it.
And so that's only inflation. Right. That has no appreciation. That is just inflation. And that's a great example of needing more dollars, right? Inflation is the expansion of the money supply, more dollars needed to buy the same asset. So sometimes they can be independent of each other. That's a great example.
And so where does money go? Where does money flow? When essentially there's all this liquidity in the market, what people are doing is they're spending it. And they're spending it on anything that they perceive will hold value. And we were just talking about cars. So things that are just, you guys can research all this yourselves. It's really fascinating. Every sort of dorky collectible is going up in value.
This is true.
Collector car values are going through the roof right now. If you ever wanted that old Porsche 911 and you were just had your heart set on it, maybe you grew up in the 80s like Julie and I, we're, Generation Xers, and you always wanted some sort of whatever. Now that thing that would have cost 10 years ago, you could have bought that thing for 35 grand. It's now like 75 or 100 grand. Everything like that is going up in value, especially real estate. Yes. So as the inflation rates rise, what you're going to see is anything that's perceived to be a store of wealth is also going to increase, and it's going to increase fast. So you're going to see rising costs. And again, we're real estate coaching radio, so we always try to focus it back in on real estate. But real estate, especially in terms of pure expense, is going to skyrocket.
That's right. So in conclusion, I actually think that this, our part 5 of our series, is probably the most interesting thing to be watching.
Sure.
Because it's changing daily. It affects pretty much every segment of the market, especially housing, right? We're all living it. We're touched by it in every way. And it's somewhat unpredictable, right?
So we talked about, in our different parts of this series, we talked about interest rates. We talked about we talked about demographics. We talked about essentially macro housing trends, migration, as Julie said, and now inflation.
And new construction.
And new construction. In our opinion, inflation is the single most significant reason why you're not going to see a turn in the housing market for a long time to come, because people are going to be buying things that are going to be a perceived store of value. If you've got $10,000 in the bank and you know that $10,000, you're confident that that $10,000 in a week will not buy you the same things that it would buy today. So $10,000 today, well, let's make it simpler. $1,000 and you want to buy a big screen TV. So you're gonna say, you know what, I'm too busy this week. I'm not going to buy that big screen TV. I'm not going to go to Costco and buy that big screen TV for $1,000. I'm just going to keep my money in the bank. But if you think that when you go to Costco a week from now, that big screen TV is going to cost you $1,100 and you've only got $1,000, your butt's going to rush over to Costco and buy it today.
Yep, and if they're sold out, you're going to order it and wait.
If you can get it.
If you can even get it.
If you can get it. So more people have money, more people are going to be buying up things. You are going to start seeing shortages of things. This is not a COVID-related thing. There's not a supply chain problem. This is essentially a people with money buying all the crap they possibly can buy thing. And that's what's going to happen. And you're also going to start seeing that happen in terms of consumer items. And I know this is crazy to think about, but like, for example, Julie and I were, we read about this stuff. We're this dorky. So we read about this stuff and we were reading about examples that are actually taking hold in the actual consumer economy. And we were reading this story about people who are now buying up, the stuff you put in pools. Right, chlorine tablets. Yeah. Right, chlorine tablets are now the price is like going up by 100%, and people are hoarding chlorine tablets. And here's a very interesting thing: if you know you're going to use toothpaste next year, which hopefully you are, if you know you're going to use all these things, toiletries, anything. If you know you're going to have these consumer items, and you're going to use them for sure next month, next year, for the rest of your life, and you're relatively confident based on the current inflation rate increasing by over a point per month. That's what it's doing right now in most consumer items. So that means that tube of toothpaste that normally costs, what does toothpaste cost, Julie?
$6.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, we need to stop brushing our teeth.
Yeah, right?
But if you know for sure that tube of toothpaste, of which you're going to use one every 2 weeks or whatever, is going to be cost you 10 or 15% more. One of the smartest things you could do, and this is what people are going to start doing, is you could go into the marketplace right now and you could actually start hoarding, basically, buying, storing anything that's going to be a perceived that you're going to be needing in the future that for sure is going to cost more. You're going to get way far ahead of the curve, and that's like an instant way of increasing your essentially your cash flow. That's a great return on investment in a way. I mean, if you're going to buy something today that in the future is going to cost you 10% more, you just basically got a 10% return on that investment. So, long story short, we are now absolutely entering into a new time in the economy. This is going to be something that's going to be quite extraordinary for all of us to participate in. You will be able to survive and thrive no matter what direction the economy goes, no matter what happens. You're going to do fantastic. Do not worry. There will always be people that need to buy and sell real estate, no matter what happens to prices, no matter what happens to the economy, no matter what happens to the employment, no matter who the president is. You happen to have been smart enough at one point in your life to say, I want to get into real estate and I want to sell something that everyone needs no matter what's going on in the world. So congratulations for that. You did the right thing. Now, don't stall out and stop learning. Don't stall out and think you know it all and know enough. You don't. Everything's going to change faster than it ever has before in our entire lives. That is the part. This is what happens when you have a whole bunch of things pile up, followed by a huge amount of money printing. We're going to experience inflation. We're going to experience it, and it's going to come on fast. And a lot of people are going to be taken aback by it. And it's going to feel good at first because you're going to think your assets are worth more, which they are. And then it's not going to feel so good when everything else is the costs rise as well. So get ready and do study this stuff yourself. Make yourself smarter. Expand your own ability to think introspectively, really. And ultimately, know that you are in the right place. And you are in the right place at the right time. Now it's up to you to do the right thing. And the smartest thing you can do is make sure that you're not circling the wagons emotionally, because if you do, you're going to then basically suffer financially. If you need us for anything, and if you want to talk to Julie and I about joining our EXP family, we'd love to talk with you about that. Just text me directly at 512-758-0206, 512-758-0206. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, and we'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.
This program has been a presentation by Tim and Julie Harris, Real Estate Coaching. For more information on our real estate coaching and training programs, visit our website at timandjulieharris.com. Remember to tune in weekdays at noon for upcoming shows, and until next time, thank you for listening to Real Estate Coaching Radio with Tim and Julie Harris.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.